sewer system, that kind
Yes, I did.
And they're like
I'll find something to walk you.
little rental cars, it's like a wine shaft. Okay?
You really want to go there?
You've got rail, you've got lights, and every time we clamp down on that, they try to get ahead of us again. So they came up, they're coming up the coast on jet skis, okay? They're loading folks up on jet skis with drugs as well.
Do you think a lot of that's drug cartel related?
Well, some's drugs and some is human smuggling. And they crash onto our shore. So we need to engage the Coast Guard there. As well, you go over to Texas, where the Rio Grande is. That's more drugs. The Rio Grande is about 40 meters wide, 4 meters deep. We were going out on a boat ride down the Rio Grande on one side of America. Things were pretty calm. On the Mexico side, you had gentlemen with fishing poles and video cameras. So they're fishing and they have a video camera or a cell phone. Now, I do my bluegill and my crappie fishing. I don't generally do it with a cell phone and a video camera. What they were doing is while we went by, they were calling up the drug ladder, okay? And saying the coast is clear, send over a raft. So they're sending over drugs. In Arizona, where it's rarely rural, you're going to need more border patrol, more fencing, and aerial devices called unmanned aerial vehicles, and be the eye in the sky. But what really we need to do, we can do this. I am confident we can secure the border, but we just have to have the will to do it. And the ultimate deterrent is by enforcing the rule of law. Enforcing the rule of law. Because if the message gets out that they're enforcing the law and you can't do business in America, then you're not gonna go, or you're gonna be less likely to. Did you have a question? I saw your hand go up.
What about the illegal immigrants coming into 450 major airports in the United States?
Well, you have
They are
to.
coming in on student visas, all kinds of stuff, and overstay. Nobody runs them out after.
Yes, so 40% of those here illegally, they came here legally, but they overstayed their visas. They overstayed their papers, and they don't report back in, and they get lost. So we have to also make sure not only enforcing the law, but we are following up in a proper way, substantive way, in a real way that's measurable, to make sure that we find those people who overstay their visa, and that there's punishment for when they don't. Congress needs to have the will to do this. As you know, the president tried to do an executive amnesty last November, and the courts have decided that he was overstepping his bounds. And I'm glad the courts did that. You know, in Congress, we have so many votes on the Republican side, but we're not veto-proof. So we are thankful that the courts are helping us out on this right now, but it's an issue that we still need to consider. Sir?
Yeah, we can't deport every one of those that are here, but I think the ones that are criminals or the ones that have broken the law, other than coming into the United States, we're going to have to find some reasonable answer, but it cannot be a blanket amnesty either, I don't think. But you've got to take care of the ones that are here. You can't just deport that many. You can't deport 10, 12, 15, 16. Who knows how many's here, you know?
Yeah, we don't for sure know. We just learned in a hearing last week, I'm on the Appropriations Committee, and on that committee I'm on 3 subcommittees: Agriculture, Homeland Security, and Transportation. We have the Director of ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement Department, in front of us, and we were talking about the rule of law. And the President had talked about in February about new policies and directives for ICE, and that if they didn't follow those directives and policies, there would be consequences. And I asked a question to the Director Saldana, about those policies and directives, and which had precedent, those policies and directives or the rule of law. And she fundamentally disagreed with me when I said that the rule of law should come first. Now that tells you a little bit about the culture of what's going on with this administration. As well, we find out that this administration released over 30,000 felons and criminals who were in jail, who were illegal immigrants, who had burglarized, who had raped, who had killed. That is serious stuff.
I can't control that. You can't tell me.
In Congress, we have about two tools,
Go right ahead.
really, that we
I'm not
be
blocking
effective
any
right now.
exits.
That's the power of the purse, using the federal
I'm not in there.
funds, funding the government as a tool and leverage. And also, in the Senate, they have the power to hold nominations. Because a lot of the times the president wants to get through his
My name is
nominees.
Brian.
Oh, Brian,
whether
Get your
it's
get your
judges,
camera.
and
You
we
can't-
have
you
to
just
make
touched
sure
me.
that we
Move out of the way.
you just have to,
use those tools the best we can.
thank you.
I agree that we need to stay border, and I definitely agree with the
You want this to go
people
national?
who are challenged definitely need to be deported and put on a list, not to be run back, But I just wonder, this might not be popular amongst fellow citizens here, but I guess what I would like to see, and I don't know if it's possible in Washington, and I agree with the rule of law that we need to follow that, is there any way we can, that as Republicans, because we come down as the racist, the negative, and point out all the negatives of us, just like me. I just wondered, what I would like to see, I guess, as far as allowing immigrants to come here, is there any way we could simplify it for those who do need refuge? I mean, there are lots coming from our positions, where they would be productive citizens for us. They would be good workers. They just want, but they don't have the tens of thousands of dollars that it costs to become a citizen of the United States. So, I just want them to come through the front door. I'm like, come here, be competitive. I'm an employer. I don't care what race you are, as long as you're a good worker. But I want you to be legal.
Yeah.
And, I think if we could, as Republicans, as a more conservative party, present that issue and say, with the rule of law, can we make our laws in a simpler way? Because it's such a long, expensive process to come here.
I think one of the reasons why a lot of people come here illegally, who could probably otherwise come through the front door, is because of the time it takes and the bureaucracy that there is with the legal system. We need to streamline that. We need to expedite it.
Right.
Because we're a welcoming nation, right? I'm a sixth-generation Iowan, okay? My great-great-great-grandparents came out in 1881. They came out, it was a little simpler back then, but they came legally, and many of your relatives did at the same time.
Even 2 generations ago, it was
Right.
much simpler. Much simpler.
And I do agree with you about, when we talk about this issue, I think we need to put a really human face on it, because I believe for the most part, people who are coming here, although illegally, they want a better life for their family. But we do respect the immigrant and welcome the immigrant. We are a nation of law. So first and foremost, I think the consensus is in Congress is you got to start with the border. And so we're going to take that up this summer. And then after that, you look at issues such as legal status, the legal system, and how to streamline that.
I think that's something as a party you need to be putting that in your message now, before you just say you close the border.
Well, not everybody in the party agrees with that. People represent the different districts, and there's different voices out there, but it's like herding cats, right? It's kind of hard sometimes to get everybody on the same page. But I try to be a voice representing this district where I think people welcome the immigrant, but the rule of law needs to be enforced. And start with the border and put a human face on it. Yes, sir.
David, I know you're very interested in oversight and making sure that things are done properly. This thing with Hillary deleting the emails, I don't understand what's the rules, and did she break the rules, and what's going on with that?
Well, the issue is our former Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, and she had an email server at home where she was at a private server, but she was emailing official documents, official correspondence through that. To me, the bottom line is, what is the law, what are the rules, and did she follow? 2, in the age of national security, cybersecurity, anybody's computer can get hacked in this place. And it's not just some kid in a Chicago Bulls jersey, drinking Mountain Dew in their basement, hacking away. They're foreign governments, organized crime, and these kind of groups out there doing this. And so, Trey Gowdy is a member from South Carolina. He chairs a special committee on Benghazi. And so my understanding is, and it's still on the queue, is that former Secretary Clinton is going to go testify and answer a lot of these questions. And they're having oversight questions as well with the State Department as to how this happened, why it happened, is there precedent for it, can you explain what repercussions there are within law because of this. But I think the First Lady, former First Lady, Secretary of State, former Secretary of State, needs to answer some questions. It's serious stuff. And that's the role of Congress, partly, is to do the oversight that we need to do to get answers. Yes?
Besides her email issue, what's happening with Benghazi?
Well, the committee is still going. They're still holding hearings. They're trying to really decide what happened. And they're trying to give those who know about it, some of the CIA informants and intelligence officials, cover to come out of the woodwork here and be protected by giving their testimony. Within our federal government, if you look at all the issues out there, we're going to have our policy debates, but the big headlines that we see, it's the management of a lot of our government agencies. Whether it's Hillary's emails, whether it's the Veterans Affairs Administration and what they were doing down in Phoenix with our veterans files, putting it in drawers and not taking care of our veterans, or whether it's healthcare.gov, or right now, Drug Enforcement Agency workers having parties with arms dealers and drug lords, and they get a slap in the wrist. And you wonder why there's a distrust in government. Because in any of our daily, real lives, you'd be fired or put in jail.
So David, until we go through the total government, the size and the scope, you can't manage anything the size that EPA is. Until you get the government, and you've got agencies out there that you've had for 100 years, and they're still operating, and they're still growing, because they all manifest on themselves. So until we some way figure out a way to take each agency that's there, whether it's still needed, whether it started 100 years ago, 60 years ago, why is it still there, what's it doing, until we start shrinking this big monster that's eating us alive, you're never going to manage it. We can ignore everything we want, but it cannot be managed at the size and the scope and the involvement that it is. Many agencies have no relevancy, and they're still going.
You make a great point about many of those agencies that have no relevancy but keep going, or they change their mission.
Yeah,
for instance, the
exactly.
Rural Electrification Agency Administration, back in the late 1800s, or early part of the last century. They existed to wire America with electricity. Well, they're still in existence. They're just called something else now, the Rural Utility Service. The size of the federal government, it shocks me how big it is and how vast it is and how deep it is that you have to penetrate it. We need to reduce the size of government, not just the physical size, but I believe the size and scope that it has in our lives. I am somebody who likes to keep the power of governmental decisions and policy decisions at the local level, as close as we can to the local level, whether it's here in Red Oak, or it's at the legislature, or with your governor, because I think the best decisions are going to be made when they're closest to the people. We were forced into a budget cutting season the last 3 or 4 years called sequestration, right? It's a new word we learned. Now that's no way to budget, but it has started reducing some of our spending, but the size of the government physical is still there. That's no way to budget. We need to look at each and every account individually and be very deliberate about budgeting because I think we're hurting ourselves in some areas where we should have some help.
But each agency writes their own rules. They become a law. The rule becomes law. And someway this has to be stopped because there's no way that the growth can be stopped as long as they can write all the rules and regulations. EPA is a fine example of that.
You took the words right out of my
And
mouth.
that was a Republican who started it.
That was Nixon.
Yes, but now it's a monster. But each of our agencies that we've got there do the same thing. I don't care what name you put on them. And so therefore, they write the regulations, they write the rules, they therefore grow, they therefore multiply, they therefore become bigger, and what they do becomes law. And we're subject to that. You had no saying on it whatsoever, and you're our elected representative.
So, thank you. So Congress, I believe, is at fault here. Congress has abrogated their authority in policymaking by allowing a few sentences in each bill, usually at the end, to exist. One of those sentences is usually the end of a bill, and the secretary or director of such agency shall issue and promulgate the appropriate rules dedicated to this act. That's a blank check.
Needs to be cut and stopped.
So what we've done is, so far in this Congress, we have passed two bills over in the House that would mandate that the Congressional Budget Office, as well as the Office of Management and Budget, that looks at these rules and regulations, that they weigh a cost benefit to them, and if it's over a certain amount of money, that Congress has to vote on them. Now, I would argue that Congress should vote on every one of them. And with the EPA and this new rule they have regarding water, waters of the United States of America, they want to redefine water in a new way that could hamper our agriculture industry, but not just agriculture. If you Red Oak wanted to do a subdivision, they would get caught up in all that too, any kind of development. It would stop that in its tracks, and it would start the process over in a new bill that would make Congress vote on it. And Congress should.
You know, we have a good example. We have our so-called president, you know, has changed the rules in Obamacare. I don't know how many times, just
She said 38.
38?
Unconstitutional.
Well, yeah, and you know, I know we're all concerned about political correctness, but maybe we should start thinking more about correctness and stop some of that malarkey. I mean, to me, it looks like Congress has the power to stop some of that. And maybe we need someone besides Mr. Boehner in there that sort of tries to call a lot of the shots.
Well, Congress has a few tools. One is the amount of votes that they have. Whether it's our current speaker or if there's any other Republican who is speaker, we only have so many votes, and we don't have enough, even if we all stuck together, to override a veto, unfortunately. And there's many of some of the things the president's been doing that we'd like to issue overrides of ourselves. You mentioned what he's done with healthcare, 38 times. That's what's really bugged me the most about the whole healthcare debate, about the president wanting to change the laws willy-nilly. And if he wants to, fine, but he should submit legislation to Congress to do that. Fortunately, we have some reprieve these days in the courts. Fortunately. But we shouldn't always depend on the courts to do this. We have the power of the purse in Congress, and as well, in the Senate, they have the power for advising consent and hold up and block some of the president's nominees, maybe, that he really, really wants. So we have those two tools. But we're limited. And I'm counting down to 18 months, and I'm sorry if I'm sounding partisan for this president to retire and go home with private life. There's a lot of reverse damage that's going to need to be changed.
Any chance of getting reinstatement of what he took out of Medicare?
Well, we're going to see, it may be the courts again who really decide this in the end, because there's a case called King versus Burwell, which will probably rule in June regarding the subsidies, and which is really the base of the law in Obamacare, and so.
I had $400 worth of treatment recently, and I had to sign a paper saying I'd pay for it because Medicare no longer covers it.
Well, we were told a lot early on that we would be safe with our doctor, with our current coverage, and the treatment that we have, that we keep getting it, but it's not true. And it was the Washington Post who, in fact, called it the lie of the year. And that's not a conservative publication.
There was a public hearing a few nights ago for the school budget, and there was a couple hundred people there from the community. And a friend asked two very good questions. He got up to the microphone and asked, how many people in here trust their government? Not a single hand that I saw came up. And he said, how many people distrust their government? I saw a hand everywhere.
Well,
it really tells a story.
It does tell a story. I think it's healthy to be skeptical and to question authority. I always think that's a good thing to do. But it's sad when people totally, just without a hesitancy, can just say, I distrust my government. I want to try to bring some, I think Congress's approval rating is under 10%. And you know what? They deserve it.
Amen.
One of my colleagues 3 weeks ago had to resign from Congress. A Republican from Peoria. He was using taxpayer dollars to redecorate his office like Downton Abbey. You know, at what point do you start thinking like that? You know, I'm just lucky to find the bathroom sometimes. You know, when I'm running through the halls, I'm not worried about, you know, redecorating and charging the taxpayer $30,000 for that. Or trying to cheat on my mileage. And this guy may go to jail, and if he does, he deserves it. He does party.
Now, honesty is a lost word anymore. It seems like people in so many, even talking about Hillary Clinton, and you know, that you can do things and not have to pay for them, where you or I would have been brought up on many charges before.
Honesty and trust are the two big issues I hear most about regarding our federal government. You can look at, you know, whoever's running for office, whether it's at the local level or the presidential level, you look at many things, right? Do I agree with them philosophically? What's their experience? Are they likable? What's their judgment? But integrity and honesty and trust, I think you need to be at the top of the list. And when it's void from your leaders, it seeps down into our culture and develops a culture of complacency and mistrust of one another.
It's
And that's not good.
awfully poor example for our young
It's
people.
horrible. Yeah. You know, in a time when we're trying to educate children and the next generation about civics and the importance of taking control of your destiny, they see what's going on in Washington or at the local level and say, why? But I'm hopeful. I really am. I think some of our best days are ahead.
I've often joked with my customers, I manage a grain elevator, and I've often joked with some of them that in order to avoid compliance issues, we're just going to change the name to Hillary Grain. I think we could probably get by with everything, right? But seriously, looking at the 18 trillion in debt, you know, none of us could manage our budgets that way. I mean, we'd all be in jail before we would ever get that far. So what are you going to do about that? How is it possible?
Well, first of all,
what are we looking at?
Yeah. First of all, you have to be honest about the number and how we got there, and you can't just point at one party. Yeah, you can't just point at one party. Has it doubled since this president's been in office? Yes. But has there been Republican presidents with a Republican Congress who've not put a check on spending? Yeah. So, first of all, you got to start there. Second of all, you have to look at the real numbers out there as well, which is not just $18 trillion, but you look at the unfunded liabilities with Social Security, Medicare, that's about $100 trillion. Then you have to have a will to do it. You have to really have a will to do it. Now, sequestration, as awful as that process was, it's a start, but it's not enough. And I think Congress would come together and make some of these tough decisions if at the presidential level, they had a partner there who would come to the table and say, I'm in it too. I'm in this with you. And so we have a great opportunity here in Iowa, because we pick presidents, right? It's better than we pick them than New York or California. But you're likely going to see whoever the next president of the United States is going to be, many of you will have a conversation with that person. And you need to make sure that this is a priority. I mean, I co-sponsored a balanced budget amendment, and it passed the House. But we need to have then a president who says, bring me that amendment, Senate, let's do this. And everybody's going to have skin in the game. It's not going to be painless either. It's not going to be painless. And when it comes to Social Security and Medicare, the unfunded liabilities, we need to have that atmosphere. If you remember when Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill got together, two different parties, right? But they got together and had a Guinness beer, and there were two Irishmen, right? And sat down and said, okay, this is not a Republican or Democrat problem anymore. This is an American problem. We need to keep the promise that was made. And these aren't entitlements, right? They're not.
No.
You paid into them.
Absolutely.
You've got skin in the game on this. And come to the table and say that we need to have a bipartisan solution for the long term. And everything has to be on the table. Doesn't mean you can't take things off, but you got to start as honest brokers then. I want that kind of leadership. I'm starting for it. I am not in Congress just to say no or have a meeting here and there. You know, I want to work. I see what's going on close up, and I've seen it close up, having worked there under Senator Grassley's office and his tutelage.
And history tells us that when the tax rates go down for the American people, revenues from Washington are a greater number.
The thing is, don't spend those revenues and use them to drive down the debt. I want to see more.
Exactly, but what are we doing to reduce our taxes? I mean, what are we doing? Because in addition to reducing taxes, you need to be bringing jobs here. You need to be growing businesses, adding businesses.
One of the things
We need to do that.
that we're focusing on in the Congress is to grow a healthy economy. I think history shows that when you put a check on spending and you reduce taxes
And regulations.
you see and provide certainty. And so that it's not a 2 or 3 year out thing, that it's 10, 20, 30 years, provide that certainty. America it just rises to the top.
Oh, yeah.
But when that revenue comes in, and I want more revenue to come in, but I don't want to do it by raising taxes. I want to create more workers who are taxpayers. You have to have the commitment to use those funds to drive down the debt and deficit.
Yeah, but the problem is right now with Yellen running the federal bank and at the 0% or 0.5% interest rate, which it's almost crazy, but they almost have to keep it there, because if we raise 2% or 3% interest, we can't service our national debt. You know, it's a double-edged sword. We need interest rates in the economy to grow, but the federal printing of money and the interest rate's 0 or 0.5% has to be there almost so we can service that debt. You know, where's that interest rate break that we can't service it? I think it's 3%. But it might be as low as 2%. You know that, or you can find it out.
You know, the Federal Reserve is kind of a mysterious being, isn't it? And the power that they have is pretty incredible. They focus on monetary policy and the interest rate. You know, I'm co-sponsor of the bill to audit the Fed, which means they just need to be more transparent. We need to know what's going on in some of their meetings where they make these big decisions and who's making these decisions. I also want the Federal Reserve to butt out of fiscal policy, budget policy, and tax policy. Because when they talk start talking about those issues, which is not their jurisdiction, it'd be like Congress trying to do monetary policy, right? When they start talking about that, markets rattle, things happen on Wall Street, the numbers move, and they just need to be quiet. Mentioned education. You were at a school board meeting, is that what you were at, or?
Yes, that was a public hearing for
Okay.
the budget.
For education. At the federal level regarding education, for me, I'm somebody who believes that the arbiters of education and the decision makers are first and foremost the parents. The local level is where those decisions need to be made. At the state level, at the highest, and I would like to take it below that to the local community school districts. At the federal level, there's a new bill called the Student Success Act, okay? You heard the No Child Left Behind? You heard about that bill? It was signed into law by President George W. Bush. It was bipartisan. We're supposed to be the cure for all of our educational woes. And there's a bipartisan consensus that that bill has failed. And that's one of the first steps to recovery, right? Admitting you have a problem. Well, that was a failure. The teachers that I talk to are very frustrated. They've become robots, they say. I was talking to a teacher in Preston who said, I've become a tester and not a teacher. And the teachers, administrators, parents, they see the faces of these kids every day, right? They hear their voice, and teachers teach differently and kids learn differently. We need to return that control to the local level. At the U.S. Department of Education, they may have the best intentions, but they see kids as a stat, as a statistic or data point. They don't see their face and hear their voice.
I think possibly the best thing you can do is get rid of your U.S. Department of Education, because they don't, these people that come from Ivy League schools and stuff have no idea what goes on in the rest of this country.
Many of them have never been in a classroom.
Yep. Most of them.
I would like just the funds that are being spent, just block grant to the states, because we're going to know how to better.
Wasn't it true that we spend more than every nation on our first student than Switzerland? I mean, because people want to say, throw more money at the problem. Wait a minute, we're throwing a lot of money at education. I don't know why it's not reaching classrooms. That's too big of a monster for me to figure out. But, I mean,
and even if it is reading the classrooms, just having that money, it's teaching. It's not just the amount of money that's in the classroom. You can have all the great books and computers and all the new technology, but if you don't know how to teach at a personal level, like they did in the old schoolhouses where my dad and grandma were. So, more money is not the cure. It is.
Hey, so I've been down here and worried about Red Oak with this FEMA and changing the floodplain and everything. 60 more businesses are going to be included in the floodplain in Red Oak, and 40 more homes and 2 apartment complexes. And it looks to me, as we're looking into this, as far as through the state and then down here locally, that the businesses take an extra large hit with FEMA. FEMA's kind of reduced the rates for homeowners with that last act they passed in 2014, but they have not done that as much for businesses. And with the whole downtown Red Oak area being now included in the floodplain under the new guidelines, I mean, the businesses are going to take a pretty big hit. And it seems like their rates are higher. Is there any way, I mean, why did we give such a big break for housing and not for businesses in this new act that you guys passed or the Congress passed? And is there anything we can do about it to help alleviate that pain and make it more equitable? I understand they're trying to make it across the entire system pays for itself, but it seems to me that more of the fees are being placed on businesses. So.
That was passed in 2014.
Correct.
I need to go back and reread that law. I did not vote on that because I wasn't in Congress at the time. But as you know, many of these laws that are passed have unintended consequences, and those who are at the Army Corps of Engineers or FEMA, they read into these acts some interesting things sometimes that sometimes aren't even there.
And then,
so we need to do the oversight and And I need to call FEMA and the Army Corps of Engineers into my office and ask them the questions that you folks want me to ask them.
And I think the only problem I'm seeing is, okay, so the Army Corps of Engineers, like the protective levee out here, they have a set of rules that when they build it, they designed it. Okay, now FEMA standards, and we dealt with that, on the Missouri River over there, FEMA standards are higher than the Corps of Engineers, but the majority of them is the same. But they're going to make Red Oak and along the Missouri River, they're going to make them pay an erroneous amount of money to recertify these levees. Well, 90% of that the Corps of Engineers already has. It's the 10% extra that FEMA wants different from what the Corps is. There's a way that those agencies need to work together so we don't have to spend all this money out here, redesigning these things or having independent engineers when we have some of the best engineers in the world already working for us. You're just adding all this extra cost onto the entire system by making the rules different and I know there's some differences that have to be done for FEMA from what the Corps of Engineers, why they have their levee systems and certified, but there's some way we need to iron this out and be able to use a lot of the engineering that the Corps does so that it doesn't cost Red Oak or Mills County or Fremont County extra money to do this engineering. So
I was in a meeting with David and some other folks about a month and a half ago.
Yeah.
With a lot of the levee districts, and boy did I get an education. And this thing isn't going to be solved quickly, unfortunately. But I think the more pressure we can put on at the local, state, and federal level, hopefully we can get there quicker and get some answers and certainty. But I know that you're on it, and I know that Mark's paying attention.
And we appreciate all the help you've given us so far, and if there's anything we can do. But I mean, it's going to be a huge issue for Red Oak starting next year or in 16. So, and I mean, I want to help them with it, and we're going to set up meetings down here at some point. But I mean, anything you can do, and I'd like to, keep working with you to try to iron those differences between FEMA and the Corps out. So.
Well, would it help to try to get the Corps and FEMA here for a public forum, if they've not already committed to it?
Sure, David, sure.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yeah.
And turn up the heat and lock the doors.
Well, that's the problem. They finally signed an agreement where they'd work together, so that's, huge issue. So.
When they define the floodplain, is it based on not having levees or what?
My understanding, Mark and I had a meeting with the DNR in Des Moines, and basically it's the creek, the Red Oak Creek that's had in the downtown area, and it's 9 square miles of runoff. So I mean, this is issues that we need to work on, but I mean, we appreciate all the help that Congressman Young's been helping us with. We just want to make sure we keep the heat on them and understand how big a deal this is to Red Oak. So.
It's also advantageous being on the Appropriations Committee, which I'm on. That power of the purse can be helpful here and there. For the past 60 years, we had somebody on the Appropriations Committee. We had Neil Smith, Tom Latham, and we had Tom Harkin on. And with Harkin and Latham retiring, there was a void there. And so I got on that committee. I fought hard to get on it. It's rare for a freshman to get on that. But I'm on there for a few reasons. It's not to hand out the credit card and start writing the checks. It is to do the oversight and use that power of the purse where we can. The earmark game is over. That ended 5 years ago. Probably won't come back. But when Congress is bogged down in gridlock and nothing's happening, sometimes for years, and we saw that with Harry Reid as the leader of the Senate. Excuse me for being a partisan there. I'm sorry, but not a lot was moving. But every year, the federal government has to get funded, and so that's where you can be at the table. And rural Iowa. Let me tell you, folks, in 1974, when Grassley started in the U.S. House, we had eight U.S. members of the House. We're down to 4. The representation from the urban areas and the cities are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's another reason why I wanted to be on the Appropriations Committee, to make sure that rural America had a voice. And you can see what's happening.
And that's why electorate vote, you can't do away with the way we select our voting process. The Electoral College has to stay. We can't change that to populist vote.
If it is a populist vote, then
we're dead.
We're out.
Small states are dead.
Yeah.
And you're going to see New York, California, Texas, and Florida pretty much running the nation. So Wall Street, Hollywood, big oil, and sugar.
Oranges.
Since you're on the appropriate, I'm sorry, Charlie, you need to.
No, this gentleman, but go ahead, Margaret.
I think you
Jerry,
want
Jerry Hansen is our director of our Veterans Affairs Office, so he has a question.
I want to talk about congressional oversight.
Okay.
We have examples of Lois Lerner, IRS. We have examples of the VA director in Phoenix. Those were criminal activities. Why are they still walking the streets? Why are they not in jail being punished? Because once you do that, you send a message to every federal worker, when you step that far out of line, you will be punished. Right now, they're walking around, nothing happening to them, that I see anyway. But Lois Lerner, for what she pulled, that's why there's nobody believing the IRS. They are a totally corrupt organization. And you've got to stop that. When it's surfaced that clearly, she's got to go down. And it's not happening. Why is that?
We have the power to do oversight, and then we can vote to hold people in contempt. We've done that with Eric Holder. We did that, we may have done that with a few others. Charges need to be brought. We need independent counsels. We need to call on an independent counsel from Department of Justice, and we have to investigate this. Eric Holder's not going to do that, unfortunately. I think it would be good if some citizens' rights groups, taxpayer rights groups, sued Lerner and this went to court. Some of the things that we found out about this administration and in past administrations have been done through lawsuits through citizens and like a judicial watch and some of those groups. How you doing? Good. It is very frustrating.
It is,
Limited
because
powers that we
clearly
have.
they have broken the law. And nothing's happened. I mean, when you got somebody in the Phoenix VA who values her $10,000 bonus more than doing her job taking care of veterans.
Yeah, those incentives were wrong. The perverse incentives, because we saw what happened. And it's the management of these agencies, which is sometimes one of the most nefarious things that we realize about our federal government. And believe me, I heard a lot from folks, not just you, a lot of our veterans, and having that veteran cemetery there in Van Meter, there'd be days like coming home on the weekends, there'd be a lot of letters stuffed in my door because I'm not too far from that cemetery and they know where I live. And that's fine. That's fine.
And any of you who have never been to the Iowa Veterans Cemetery, stop a few minutes and look at it. It is a beautiful facility. It's well run. It's something Iowa can be very proud of.
It's hallowed ground. It really is.
Since you're on the Appropriations Committee and HUD always has their hand out, would you talk a little bit about Agenda 21?
Agenda 21, United Nations. It's a power grab for our private property. To me, the United Nations is ineffective and corrupt body.
Yeah.
If we're looking for some savings in our federal budget, they can start by getting rid of or diminishing the amount of money that we give the United Nations. Maybe we give them $1 just so we have some kind of leverage in there, but we're not hearing a lot about it in Congress right now. But I do know that a lot of people are talking about it here, and that I'm probably one of the few people who know what it is at the federal level.
What would happen if we got completely out of the United Nations?
What would happen?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see.
We wouldn't have a voice.
Well, do we now?
That's the question. Do we
Our
have a
Constitution
voice?
does not allow that.
Do we have a voice and are we effective?
Am I correct on that? Right now, they can't do it with the Constitution as it's written. They can't segregate that to the United Nations.
No.
That would take an act of Congress to get that done, or maybe it would take all the states to ratify even. How did they get it done without that?
You'd have to go back in the history books and look at the record as to when that was created. And that's a good question. I don't know. But I do know that they're ineffective.
they saw what happened when we rejected the League of Nations. And that's how it came to be. It was a good idea at the time.
But they're ineffective, and when you look at their security councils, sometimes those are terrorist states who are on those. Which brings me up to, I think we're about out of time, 5 minutes. I just wanted to talk about some of the big things that are coming up that we may be talking about that you should know about, and I know that you've read about them and seen them on the TV, and that is the President sent up a resolution to Congress called the AUMF. It's a new acronym, Authorization Use of Military Force, regarding force against ISIS. ISIS is an enemy that is unlike kind of any other group that we could be authorized to use force against, and are using force against currently under an older authorization. But they're not a country, they don't have a flag, they don't have a border, but they do have a very radical, extreme political, religious ideology. And we are seeing that they are ravaging the Middle East and trying to grow their influence in other places. They need to be stopped. I believe that the Middle East, some of those Arab countries, they're starting to wake up and see what's going on in their own backyard. And we saw that with what happened with that pilot from Jordan, right? Who was set on fire, and then the next day Jordan let all hell loose through fighter strikes. ISIS beheaded 19 of our brothers and sisters in Christ, the Coptic Christians in Egypt. Whether or not they were Christians or not, it's wrong, period. And we cannot let this spread. I believe that the resolution the President sent up was a little weak. I wanted to strengthen the President's hand. I may not agree with this President on a lot of things, but I want to strengthen the hand of the Commander-in-Chief to allow his generals and officers to do the job that needs to be done. There is not a lot of talk about moving this resolution through Congress right now because many Republicans don't think it's strong enough, and Democrats think it's too strong. The other issue is, but besides a military solution, you have to engage in a coalition where there's diplomatic means as well as sharing intelligence. And then the final issue regarding world affairs that we talked about is Iran, and that agreement that this administration struck with Iran. Now, we had a top secret classified briefing the other day with members of Congress in the House, with the Secretary of Energy, the Secretary of State, and the Secretary of Treasury, and the CIA official. What I learned in there is not much different than what I've been seeing in the press and on TV. And it's interesting how this is being played out in the press. In the American press, they say it's one thing. In the Iranian world press, they say it's another. We really don't know the details right now. But Congress needs to have a role in this. The big issue is, should this be voted on as a treaty? Well, there have been past agreements like this that have been voted on it as if it was a treaty. The administration will argue that we don't have diplomatic ties with Iran, so this can't be seen as a treaty. But we have a role here in regards to sanctions, and I think that we need to reimpose the older sanctions that we had, current sanctions, and maybe impose some stiffer ones and start all over and leave from a position of strength. I do not trust Iran. They have a horrible track record. Thank you for letting me be here today. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for the cookies and coffee. Very good. If you're ever in Washington, D.C., I expect you to come by our office. 515 Cannon is your office. David, good tour. We want to do the same for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.